Well, it's a pretty sweeping bill. The government intends to pass it before the next election, before the House rises, probably before the end of the summer. And today is the first day of debate on it. So, of course, we had the public safety minister give a great speech about what he thinks, what he thinks the needs are that this bill fulfills. It does a variety of things. Most of the attention has been on the fact that it gives CSIS the ability to disrupt activities sort of in the name of terrorism, but it includes a very wide and vague definition of what terrorism could be, anything that attacks Canada's critical infrastructure, the economy. We heard this week some people raise concerns about environmental activists being targeted by this bill because, they would be protesting against pipelines. The government has decided pipelines are necessary for the Canadian economy, so perhaps they would be included in this bill. And it also touches on a variety of other things, like the expansion of the no-fly list, the ability to share information between departments a lot more easily than we can now. So it's a pretty sweeping bill, but really the focus is on sort of this, seems to be on these activities that CSIS would now be allowed to do. It would not just be an agency that gathers information. It could actually do things, anything short of pretty much of killing or sexually assaulted someone. It would essentially get a green card to do illegal and unconstitutional activities if the court agrees to give them that power in the specific isolated cases. The NDP today announced that they will not be supporting this bill. Thomas Mulcair had a press conference in which he talked about taking a principled stand. Unlike the Liberals, he's actually in the House of Commons right now making a speech where he's really attacking the bill for being dangerously vague. He's accusing the government of putting politics ahead of good public policy, of driving a wedge between different communities. I don't know if you'll recall, but the Prime Minister actually did not announce this bill in the House. He did it in sort of a campaign-like event outside of Ottawa. And he's sort of been taking a tone in his language in which he is, let me just say, critics suggest that he's taking a sort of anti-Muslim tone and creating a wedge between that community and the rest of Canadians. There is an exclusion in the bill that says, for greater certainty, this bill does not include lawful advocacy, protest, dissent, and artistic expression. But even when he was asked, this is Mr. Mulcair, when he was asked in his press conference this morning, well, what about sovereigntists and, protests that they might be engaged in? He actually, without using the word sovereigntist or separatist, he said, yeah, he thinks that, they probably could be included in this bill. So there are concerns from a wide variety of people about how this bill could be applied. And Mr. Mulcair also wants to see more money given to communities dealing with terrorism. The Liberals' position is sort of 1 foot in one camp, 1 foot in the other camp. They came out actually even before the bill was tabled, signaling their intention to support the bill. They kind of got stuck in a way that they didn't foresee on the mission to Iraq. They got squeezed and their stance was unpopular. And so they're worried that the election is going to be a discussion about the economy and security, and that on the security front, they're going to be shown to be weak because they didn't support the mission in Iraq. And so they didn't want to appear like they were not going to support this anti-terrorism bill. So they're supporting the anti-terrorism bill, but Mr. Trudeau intends on saying during the campaign that the bill is terrible and that you really need parliamentary oversight. And they're going to try to bring forward that amendment. But even if their amendment fails, which it likely will because the government says it won't support parliamentary oversight, they still plan to support the bill. So that's not confusing enough. And Elizabeth May thinks this is a terrible, terrible bill, and the Green Party is definitely not going to support it.
A former candidate for the U.S. presidency has come down hard on the Canadian government's new anti-terrorism bill, calling it a crass effort to sell the politics of fear. Ralph Nader says Prime Minister Stephen Harper is exaggerating the threat of Islamic terrorism, and his paranoia has now exceeded Washington's chief attack dog, former Vice President Dick Cheney, and he has written a letter to Harper to express his concerns. Nader, a noted consumer advocate and the author of Canada First, A Salute to Canada and Canadian Achievement, said Harper is following the militarist anti-civil liberties path of the United States by expanding the powers of the Canadian Security Intelligence Agency. Bill C-51 gives the agency the power to disrupt potential terrorist plots and police broader powers to detain suspects who may carry out, rather than the higher standard of will carry out, a terrorist activity.
Terrorism is a real threat, and everyone agrees that public safety is the primary responsibility of any government. But Canadians don't have to choose between security and their rights. Interfering with infrastructure, interfering with economic stability. Why is the Prime Minister lumping in legitimate dissent with terrorist activities? In legitimate dissent with terrorist activities.
Mr. Speaker, the bill, as I just outlined, does absolutely no such thing, not even remotely, Mr. Speaker. This is, in fact, the attempt of the NDP to always say that anything that is in defense of our security somehow undermines our freedoms. And, Mr. Speaker, that is simply not true. All we are seeing here, Mr. Speaker, is as the NDP's positions on this issue become more and more irrelevant, more and more unconnected to Canadians' real concerns, their statements on the issue become more and more extreme.
If the NDP would read the third three-page of that bill, they would see that there is specific exemption of all lawful advocacy, protest, and all sorts of activity. So once again, the NDP are demonstrating they are taking an ideological stand. It's no surprise for years here in Ottawa, they have always opposed our anti-terrorism measures. It's disappointing, but somewhat not surprising.
NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden addressed students at a Toronto private school via video link Monday to warn about the perils of being complacent as the government makes sweeping changes to Canada's anti-terrorism laws. Speaking from Russia via a live feed, Snowden specifically referenced the Conservative government's Bill C-51. More than 900 students attended the talk titled Privacy versus Security, a discussion of personal privacy in the digital age, hosted at Upper Canada College.
One of the most significant achievements for liberal society around the world in the last century was the invention and propagation of the internet itself.
Nearly 1,400 people watched the live broadcast online. Snowden urged the audience to be adept at lining up facts versus rhetoric with emergency legislation born from times of fear and panic. He added, though Canada is not unique in its anti-terrorism laws and surveillance programs, it's important to be critical toward political arguments championing their necessity. Journalist Glenn Greenwald was also on hand for the keynote via conference call. He criticized what he sees as the Conservative government's tactic of using fear to untether the weight of public scrutiny to push the anti-terrorism measures into law.
We're going to be looking on the news and see. For the first time, welcome. Crossfire should be very lively. We're going to have a little taster of it. This is going to rock the world. The whole world is going to hear about this. At the Supreme Court's decisions today. You know that, right?
Oh, I was thrilled that you're missing the case, therefore the case is permitted. Because of that,
we are now proclaiming we are Al-Qaeda,
to be a little more alienated from what
not Arab, not in the Arabian Peninsula or in the Maghreb. We are AQ of Canada. Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm not opposed to people having the right to have a relationship.
Al-Qaeda, that's who we are.
Much like Cardinal Dolan, who you were dissing.
That's it.
I actually do believe it's a Christian.
Who's going to disagree with us?
Cardinal Dolan described it as a tragedy for America. And a tragedy? Well, a tragedy that two loving people of the same sex can get
as of today, we are
Muslim. And you want to say that's, you want to trivialize, and that's your right.
As of today,
I do believe states
we're secret
but I object
agents. We're
in this case, it's very clear cut.
We're sleepers who've been woken.
To reject 8 million Californians.
This bill can be improved, but on the whole, it does include measures that will help keep Canadians safe. As such, the Liberal Party will support it. Matters of national security should be beyond partisanship. We will take a constructive approach to improving this bill. Liberals welcome the measures that build on the powers of preventative arrests, make better use of no-fly lists, and allow for more coordinated information sharing by government departments and agencies. There are some areas of broad concern, though, that I would like to briefly touch on. First, the question of oversight, and second, the need for regular review of our national security laws. We are very hopeful that the government will respond positively to our serious and thought-through amendments on oversight and review. But if the government does not bring those in, we will still support the bill, which has elements in it which keep Canadians safe, but we have committed to bringing in robust oversight and appropriate review if we have the honor of forming government after the next election.
Maybe snow and sleet would keep Americans from heading to malls, but Al-Shabaab, not so much. The Somali terror group, which was responsible for a 2013 attack at the Westgate Mall in Nairobi, Kenya, that killed dozens, in a video urged radicals to undertake lone wolf attacks on shopping centers in the U.S., Canada, and the U.K. It singled out the Minneapolis area Mall of America, which is in a region that includes the largest Somali American community in the country.
So this weekend's threat by terror group Al-Shabaab urging Muslims to attack shopping malls in the U.S., Canada, and Britain.
It's a little scary, but I'm not too worried about it.
The threat, released via video on Saturday, specifically mentions the hugely popular Mall of America in suburban Minneapolis, the West Edmonton Mall in Canada, and the Westville Mall in Stratford, England. That mall is run by the same corporation, Westfield, that operates Old Orchard in Skokie, Hawthorne in Vernon Hills, and Fox Valley in Aurora. None of the local malls were specifically mentioned in the threat, but knowing that it's the same group of extremists that attacked a mall in Nairobi, Kenya in September of 2013, killing 67 people, has some worried.
Pretty frightening, and I mean, I have kids, and I always take them to the mall in this cold weather, so it's really, concerning to us.
U.S. officials say there's no credible evidence suggesting a U.S. mall attack is in the works, and Westfield Corporation released a statement that reads in part, "There is no evidence of an imminent threat to our shopping centers, but as always, Westfield Corporation will take every available step to keep our shopping centers safe for staff, retailers, and customers."
We focus on scary things instead of mundane things, even though the mundane things kill us more. So I think it's important to be a little bit more realistic about what we choose to be afraid of.
The mall says it will continue to devote significant resources to its security arrangements to make sure that the shopping center continues to operate as normal.
We've got to be vigilant, so we ramp up security. There was a call for an attack on locations in Canada and Europe, and so in response to that, I ramped up the presence of the Federal Protective Service at federal buildings a couple of months ago. I'm sure that security at this particular mall will be enhanced in ways visible and not visible.